The legend. It's kind of nice having a legend around. Hi, Gene.
John Legend is
John,
one of my
okay,
favorites.
There we go.
Hey, Brian, you inspired me last week. Can we put the verse up? This is one of the verses that you started out with your message, and it talked about God asking Moses to tell Israelites to bring an offering. It was kind of, you framed your message around this. And I got inspired. You know, I'm someone that prides myself in being biblical in whatever I do and say. So I actually, and I've already turned in my commitment card a few weeks ago, but I thought I'd add to it. So here is some blue yarn, which is up there on that list. And the thing that's really special, here's some goat hair. And I think this is going to put us over the top in our building fund. So thank you very much. And you don't realize it, but they all think you're the man. Okay. But don't stick it to them, all right? I'm going to start today by asking a question. What do you want to be remembered for? How do you want to be remembered? What kind of a legacy do you want to leave behind? Maybe as a church we would say, what do we want to be remembered for? What kind of a legacy do we want to leave behind? Because as Brian mentioned, we're 1 week away from a huge historical, and this is really a historical moment for Cornerstone Boulder. Next Sunday is the day we anticipate that 100% of us that call Cornerstone our home, and hopefully maybe even a few that don't, will make that one fun pledge for Dream Boulder. And we also wholeheartedly anticipate that we'll then move forward to refresh and expand this very tired and sometimes overcrowded building. This building was given to us free and clear 20 years ago by the generosity of the church that previously met here. They just handed the title and said, do what you can in Boulder. And we've all benefited immensely from their generosity. Now we're asking all of you to be generous so that future generations here at Cornerstone will benefit immensely from our generosity. And you know, one of our 9 core elements here at Cornerstone is called generations. And it's the value we have to continually invest into future generations while still honoring previous generations. And it's because of this generations element that we see such a broad and healthy spectrum of all ages, not just here on Sunday mornings, but in a lot of the things that we do here. It's a very broad spectrum represented here at Cornerstone. And those of us here who are older like me have invested our time and our resources over the last 20 years in order to repeat this cycle over and over and over again to continually leave that legacy behind us. And there was absolutely no way that we could have known 4 years ago when we unveiled those 9 elements for the very first time in our church that the generations element would lead us to this very initiative, this Dream Boulder initiative. But I want you to watch a short video that we made 4 years ago on generations. And by the way, all of our 9 elements are on our homepage. If you just scroll to the bottom of our homepage, they're all there. We made a video for each one of them. They're all amazing. But watch this one. And I want you to notice if you were watching it for the first time today, you'd probably think that we made it specifically for Dream Boulder. Here it is.
How do you want to be remembered? Because you will be remembered. Your life will be felt like a stone that falls into water. Your legacy will ripple out for years to come, for generations to come. Think of these walls, this building. 60 years ago, people began to dream, to pray, and to build. Their acts of love and sacrifice establish us today. This is why we honor those that have gone before us. We sit at their feet and we listen. We learn. We thank those who have made these dreams a reality for the ones that would follow. And we ourselves continue to dream, pray, and to build, knowing that our acts of love and sacrifice will be felt to others tomorrow. So we bless those that are young, and we pursue them in their youth. We look for their potential, and we encourage them to go further than we ever did. We celebrate their dreams and ask them to pray, to build, and to leave their own legacy.
Is that prophetic or what? It's amazing. May our acts of love, it says, and sacrifice today establish future generations here at Cornerstone, just as the previous acts of love and sacrifice of Southern Hills Baptist Church has established us today. Wow. And so how do we want to be remembered? What kind of a legacy do we want to leave behind for future generations? And it's questions like these that are driving this Dream Boulder initiative. And next week, we'll all have an opportunity to answer them together with one heart and one purpose. And so my message today is called The Power of One, Doing Together What We Could Never Do Alone. And I want to talk about the unlimited potential that exists when a cluster of individuals unite themselves together in one heart and one purpose. We are a faith community here at Cornerstone. Can you hear that? We're a unity, which comes from the Latin. It literally means together change. That's what community is. And so community is really a cluster of change makers. We're a bunch of change makers who unite together in one heart and one purpose to make a better world. And we're only limited by the limits of our dreams. And in this message, I'm not only hoping to increase our faith, that by uniting together in one heart and purpose, the Dream Boulder Initiative is entirely possible. It's within our grasp. But I also want to increase our faith that as a cluster of change makers here at Cornerstone Boulder, that there's virtually no limit to what we can accomplish together as we dream even beyond Dream Boulder. And I want to do this by sharing 3 passages from the Bible that collectively will lay a strong foundation for how we are to organize ourselves as a faith unity. I'm going to keep playing on that word, okay? And the reason we do this is in order to unleash the unlimited potential of the power of one. It's an amazing potential, doing together what we could never do alone. And since we've been using the Exodus story as a template for all of these Dream Boulder messages, the first passage comes from Numbers chapter 11, verse 10 through 17, which takes place shortly after the Israelites have been freed from the Egyptians, only to end up in a barren desert. And so immediately the people begin to slam Moses on all their social media platforms, saying, "He brought us here to die. We're going to starve to death. And at least in Egypt, we had meat to eat and our bellies were full." It was just blowing up all over the place. And this is what our passage says, okay? Moses heard the people of every family wailing at the entrance of their tents, meaning they were on their pads and computers. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive these people? Did I give birth to them? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant, and to the land you promised an oath to our ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat.' I can't carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me. If I have found favor in your eyes, though, don't let me face my own ruin." Okay. So having previously been the lead pastor here for 24 years, I have to admit that there are at least, a few times in those 2.5 decades that I had a similar kind of conversation with God. Lord, it's just too much. Take me out, take me home. And I know for certain that Brian, especially in kind of leading this Dream Boulder initiative, and in this new role as the lead pastor here, he's already thrown up a prayer too of the same thing. Because the truth is that every lead pastor will tell you that the role of a lead pastor is unlike any job on this planet. Not that it's the hardest job, but it's the most unique job, okay? What other kind of job on this planet has you leading a group of people through all their seasons of life, from birth till death, all the challenges, all the ups and downs in between, and most of them relate to you as if they're your boss. There isn't a lead pastor on this planet who, like Moses, hasn't said to God at least once during their rough season, do me a favor and help me check out. In fact, it's sobering to say this, but one of our former pastors, Scott Kelly, who moved on about 10 years ago to lead a church in another state, took his own life just a couple of months ago. Horrible, shocking news to us. During a recent season when 3 other pastors took their lives in the span of only a couple months, there was an article published, Why Are So Many Pastors Killing Themselves? And this is just a little snippet of what it said. There is no lack of statistics about pastors and depression, burnout, health, low pay, spirituality, relationships, longevity, and none of them are good. According to the Schaefer Institute, 70% of pastors fight depression, 71% burnout. And another article cited these grim statistics. Get these. Just notice how high these are. 90% of pastors report their ministry ended up being completely different in a negative sense than what they thought it would be like before they started. 80% believe pastoral ministry has negatively affected their families. 80% of pastors continually anticipate a serious conflict within their church. 75% of pastors report significant stress-related crisis at least once in their ministry. 84% of pastors feel they are on call 24/7. 78% of pastors report having their vacation and personal time interrupted with ministry duties or expectation. 66% of church members expect a minister and their family to live at a higher moral standard than themselves. 84% of pastors desire to have close fellowship with someone they can trust and confide in, but have difficulty finding such a person in their own church. And 70% of pastors report they have a lower self-image of themselves now than when they first started. That is really sad. There's just no job on this planet like the job of a lead pastor. And so Moses isn't being overly sensitive and dramatic here. He's leading about 3 million hangry people in the desert. This is the first ever mega mobile church, right? Maybe called Wilderness Church. 3 million people, that's pretty big. And if Moses is going to survive, some things are going to need to change. They're going to need to change really fast. So here's God's solution to this problem. He says to Moses, bring me 70 of Israel's elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with you. And I will come down and speak to you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you, and I will put it on them, and they will share the burden, okay? They will share the burden, that's so important, of the people with you so that you will not have to carry it alone. So what's God's plan? Not just shared leadership, but shared leadership with those who are filled with the power of God's Spirit. The mistake that a lot of churches make is that they're so desperate for leaders that they'll take anyone who has a pulse. Only to discover over time that instead of solving their problems, they've just created even more problems. And oftentimes, those problems result in a horrible division and even a church split where, and after a protracted amount of time, cause deep pain and conflict and division where no one, no matter what side of the conflict you're on, escapes from being wounded by the experience. In fact, shout out amen if you have ever been part of something like that. And I want to hear you loud. Amen. Yeah, same thing in first service. Most of you. Cornerstone's been around for 25 years. We've never even come close to a situation like that because we're careful. We're careful about who we invite to be on our executive leadership team. It's not like we don't ever have conflict, because we do. Conflict is normal. But we make sure that everyone places a high value on unity. That is first and foremost on vetting somebody. Are you a person of unity? Because the power of one is an unstoppable force. We even have a provision in our Constitution that if our leaders can't agree on an issue, they become divided on it, that someone can call for a vote to settle the matter. But in all the years that I've been here, we've never even once taken a single vote at this leadership level, because if we're not in agreement on an issue, we just wait until we are in agreement, or we'll just shelve it. It's just not right for right now. And so to keep Moses from wanting to die, God says to recruit a band of executive level leaders called elders who will share in the burden and responsibilities for caring for the tribe. And even though Moses is the designated leader, this will be a shared leadership because the burden is just too great for one person. And so in this passage, the leadership grows from one leader to now 71 leaders, all who are empowered by the Spirit of God. The second passage takes place just a short time later in the Exodus story, and it's a similar problem as the one we just read about, but solving this one will require an even larger layer of leadership. In this passage, Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, comes to visit him and notices a big problem. And here's what it says in Exodus chapter 18, verse 13 through 23. It says, "The next day, Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning until evening. And when his father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, 'What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, while all these people stand around you from morning till evening?' And Moses answered him, 'Because the people come to me to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me, and I decide between the parties, informed of God's decrees and instructions.' And Moses' father-in-law replies, 'Well, what are you doing is not good. You and these people who come, you'll only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone.' And so in this situation, the way Moses has organized his ministry in that desert wilderness congregation will not only lead to burning himself out, but it's going to burn everyone else out too. And so here's the advice Jethro gives to Moses. He says, 'Listen now to me, and I'll give you some advice.' He's an elder, right? 'And may God be with you.'" This is why we have such a value on investing in the future generations, but honoring the previous generations. There is wisdom over here. There's a lot of impulse over here. And we want that energy, right? But we also need the wisdom. Or so Jethro says, "You must be the people's representative for God." You're the guy God's chosen, right? "And bring disputes before God. And teach the people his decrees and instructions. Show them the way they are to live and how to, the way they're to behave." This is Moses' main role, to teach the Torah and to help resolve relationship conflicts. But the task is too big for one leader, even the 73 leaders now. And so Jethro says, "Select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain. Appoint them as officials over thousands, and then hundreds, and then 50s, and tens." This is a large group of people. Do the math. "Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring the difficult cases to you. The simple ones, they can decide on that." And this is the best part. "This will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. And if you do this, and God so commands, you'll be able to stand the strain of all these people, and all these people will go home satisfied." I mean, don't you come here to go home satisfied? So this is going to be a huge layer of leadership made up of people who fear God and hate dishonest gain. In other words, they're people of integrity. And by the way, these first two passages I'm covering today are the source where we get the requirements for elders and deacons detailed in a few passages found in the New Testament teaching. 70 elders filled with the Spirit of God from our first passage, and now hundreds of deacons who are people of integrity. That wasn't a new idea. in the New Testament. This is where it traces back to. And notice how the main function of this larger layer is to maintain unity. They will act as mediators between interpersonal conflicts, disputes that arise between the members of this mobile mega church. And when you have 3 million hangry people wandering in the desert for 40 years, my guess is that there were lots and lots of conflicts to resolve. I mean, we do a lot of that here, living in the Boulder bubble. Can you imagine what it would be like to be out in that desert for 40 years, exposed, eating the same food day in and day out? And notice how the main function of this larger layer, again, is to act as mediators. And I love the picture this passage creates, all right? Because in the end, no matter what we do together as change makers, as a community, Jesus says the main way that the world is going to recognize us as his followers is if we what? We love one another. We love one another. By your love for one another will all people know that you're my disciples. Love is to be at the core of our community, our change making. It is to be the driving force behind everything that we do. And if you're in any form of leadership here at Cornerstone or anywhere else for that matter, you might be greeting people as they come in through the doors. You might be helping count the offering. You might be teaching a Bible study, leading a home group somewhere. But your main role, beyond that, your main role is not to create relational conflict, it's to resolve relational conflict. Because as the Apostle Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13, that if we're not doing things out of love, we're just adding to all the noise in the world. And I'm sure you've noticed by now, the world is getting noisier and noisier by the minute. We're not supposed to add to that noise. And we don't add to it by doing everything in love. And ultimately, the reason why we work so hard to create community is because God shows up really big in unity. And that's our last passage, which is Psalm 133. God shows up big time when we relate to each other in unity. So here's Psalm 133. Behold, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. And then he gives 2 examples about what it's like. It's like the precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down on the collar of his robe. Aaron was the high priest. And when you poured oil on his head, when he first became the high priest, they poured oil on his head, and it rolled down onto his face and onto his beard and onto his collar. It was an anointing. It was empowering him to do the role of the priesthood. And so when we live together in unity, there's an anointing released from God that's unlike any other kind of situation. The power of God, the blessing of God shows up when we unite together. This is why Jesus says, if 2 or more are gathered in my name, there I am. And when he doesn't just mean show up and stand like together and say, well, here we are. I guess Jesus showed up. No, he's going to show up when we're in unity together. That's what he's getting at. And then it goes on to give the second example. It's as if the dew of Hermon were falling in Mount Zion. Mount Hermon is the highest peak in Israel. And you may not know this about Israel, but it is not a water-abundant nation. In other words, they do not have enough natural water resources to supply its population. Now, that's naturally. Israel is one of the leading nations in technology, and because of that, they are actually a water-abundant nation where all their neighbors aren't, because they have 5 or 6 desalination plants. They tap into aquifer water. They repurpose agricultural water and use it over and over and over again. And so they've become a water abundant nation because of the technology. But naturally, they don't have enough water. And certainly back in these days, they did not have enough water. So the dew of Hermon was critical because during droughts, during seasons where they didn't have enough water, the dew actually helped to get the seeds nourished, to get them to a point where they can get into their rainy season. Actually provided life. It's like the dew of Hermon. It brings life. When we act together in unity, we not only get this anointing, this power of God that's working in our midst, but it brings life. It brings life to areas that should be dead. And of course, it finishes by saying, for there, where's the there pointing to? Unity. For in unity is God's blessing. He bestows his blessing, even life forevermore. That's how important it is for us to be a calm unity. That makes sense? And I know that some of you experience what this is talking about here on Sunday mornings, at other places in our ministries, because we have not gone down the path of division, because we have such a high value of unity. There is an anointing here. There is a blessing here. There is life here. And we're all the recipients of that. And the people that come here, the people that you invite, the people that we intersect with, they're the recipients of it. We want more of this. That's behind Dream Boulder. We want more. It's not about, as we keep saying over and over again, it's not about the walls of this church. It's what happens in the walls of these church. It's what happens outside of the walls of this church. We want more influence. And so I want to show you a video that we made for Dream Boulder. We've been showing you videos every week. I had no idea that when they made this video, they would actually take some of the footage from generations that I planned on showing you. So it makes it super cool for me to know that God was working on this. But this is going to show you some of the things that we as a community are involved in, both locally and around the world. I think it'll bless you, so watch it. One of the things that really helped us was we began to realize that we weren't really impacting the city in any way. That there was a lot of needs in the city, and we were just really ingrown. Mm-hmm. And everything we did was in these walls of the church. And so we began to look at how can we meet the needs of the city? How can we do things in such a way that in 10 years the city would look at us as, we really need you to be here. We're glad you're here. Mm-hmm. We partner together, and that's really happened.
Yeah.
God is taking us on a path that is beyond what we could have ever imagined. Here in Boulder, some schools have up to 40% of their students living in poverty, and with recent budget cuts in those schools, staff members have had to step down and after-school programs have had to close. In Cambodia, there's a culture where many are living in fear. A fear that is driven by the practices of spirit worship and not understanding the loving nature of Jesus. In Uganda, dozens of kids have been living as orphans with nowhere to go. And at the same time, entire villages have been stricken with waterborne illnesses from the unclean wells they've been forced to drink out of. In Mexico, thousands are suffering from the nightmare of human trafficking. Rescued victims every day are taking the first steps to rebuilding their lives. When we heard about the need for volunteers in our schools, we answered the call. And now we have dozens of people giving out of their time every single week to hang out with kids after school and help them to read. Even in the spiritual climate of Cambodia, we have been privileged to be a part of God building a new body of believers. Since 2013, our friends from Cornerstone have been going and doing life-on-life ministry with the Cambodian people, showing them the true nature of Jesus and what it looks like to walk with him day to day. And in just the last 3 years, our church has raised over $50,000 for the Ugandan people, investing in them to build wells, schools, and provide clean water. And in Mexico, we've been honored to partner with Reintegra to see dozens of rescued girls have the opportunity to get an education to fight back against human trafficking. And these stories are only a few.
I would want to say thank you, because you are helping connect with kids and ultimately change their lives.
We are truly amazed, though, at the consistent support from over 50 people. You guys have truly been the ones to send us there. And we're so grateful for those who have done that. So we thank you for your support. We thank you for your love. Thank you for choosing to make an eternal impact in the lives of Cambodian people.
We are so much grateful as the head teacher of this school, and on behalf also of the children. I want to appreciate so much Cornerstone. God is using you. We are seeing Jesus in our community. Because if Jesus was here, that is what he would be doing.
La verdad es que cada donativo que ellos dan, de verdad hace un cambio tremendo en nuestras vidas. Muchas de nosotras podemos tener nuevos sueños, podemos conquistar nuevas metas y sobre todo podemos seguir adelante y realizando una nueva vida.
These are just a few of our moments. These are just a few of our dreams.
I hope that makes you all proud. This is what we are doing as a community together. We want to do more of it. You know, statistically, if kids aren't reading by first or second grade, they're almost certainly not going to succeed. And we have changed that for so many kids. They're probably going to go on to be leaders and change the world themselves. In Mexico, the girls that we have been supporting, they go around the world and talk on the subject of human trafficking. They have changed the face of human trafficking in a lot of nations that still have this, and especially in Mexico. It wasn't too long ago that Mexican people didn't even know this was happening. And God is using all these girls that we're supporting. In Israel, in the little piece that we contribute and that I contribute in trying to change the impression of what it means to be a Christian, because for Jews, the only thing they know about Christians is that we were horrible to them for decades, for centuries and centuries, using our faith as a way to kill them. And so things are changing, and the Jewish people are writing about Rabbi Jesus. That they're not necessarily believing him as the Messiah, but they're so open now to having conversations. Everything changes. There's so much that we can do in our little piece. We just have this little piece. But along with all the other pieces of the puzzle, God's using it to change this world. And we really are change makers, and it's amazing.